Welcome, everyone, to episode number 22 of the Intersection 4 podcast. You have your usual three hosts here. You have Brendan, founder, we have Hemis, the investor, and we have me, the puppy owner, and my dog is barking in the background. So if you guys hear him barking, that's the reason why. But yeah, excited to be back, excited to chat again with you guys, and excited to bring three interesting topics here. So we're going to be talking about, well, primarily two things. We're going to be talking about robotics, and we're also going to be talking about new interfaces for AI agents. So, how about we start there? I mean, this was something you proposed, it's something you wanted to bring up. So, give a brief intro. I know we chatted a few months ago about AI agents and interfaces for AI agents. You were mentioning that there's new interfaces coming up. What excites you in the space, and what's interesting? What's interesting about these new interfaces that are popping up?
Yeah, so to recap the discussion, the first thought was a couple months ago, well, websites are not really built for AI to read, they're built for humans to read, right? So if all of these AI agents and AI platforms are going on websites to try and extract information, that's a pretty, inefficient way to do that. And then we went further in that topic and we're talking about how the API interfaces are also not built for AI agents to necessarily use, right? They're built for programmers to use, and every use case is like very specific, and you have to be exactly hitting the endpoint the right way and getting the right response, and that doesn't really make itself really very readily available for agents again. And so I'm actually the novice here. I think Brendan is going to have the most experience with this, but obviously, I think everybody's kind of heard about, MCPs coming from the Anthropic team, and that being like the new gold standard for creating a world where agents have their own interface and have their own way of interacting with the world of data. So would love to understand from the AI expert and the data expert here how you see kind of MCPs changing the landscape.
Before you go, Brendan, just want to highlight this tweet real quick. To your point, and I miss 100%. This Andrew Karpathy. He made this tweet. I remember seeing this a couple days ago. It's 2025, and most content is still written for humans instead of LLMs. 99.9% of attention is about to be LLM attention, not human attention. For example, 99% of libraries still have docs that basically render to some pretty HTML static pages, assuming a human will click through them. In 2025, the docs should be a single your project.md text file that is intended to go directly into the context window of an LLM.
Mhm.
Copy, paste, and repeat for everything. So, Brendan, thoughts here?
I think MCP is overrated. I'll take the under on this, and here's why. The time it takes for the world to adopt MCP, the agents will be plenty good enough to navigate to the websites and do it themselves. I think like most things, the curve of the explosion curve that this would have to generate would have to be enormous, and the incentive is on actually the company to create an MCP of their system, such that the agents can leverage it, versus the agent companies to just get so good at navigating to websites such that they can effectively MCP it. So I think the rate of AI agents getting better will be faster than companies building MCP hooks. But of course, there's going to be the cool, sexy companies that will create all those MCP hooks, which like I'm sure Figma's done on by now, Cursor's done. New companies will do them in order to get fast adoption. I think as a new up and coming company, it'd be a great way to get quick early adoption in the current agentic life cycle of Twitter. But I think the reality is the agents will get good enough that MCP is like a nice, easier way to get involved with some system, but it'll be plenty fine to get around it.
Mm,
Do you think
interesting.
we ever converge towards some standard in agent interaction, or is it all going to be agents are so capable that they can just figure out each other's standards at any point in time?
No, I disagree. The agents already know our standards because it was trained on our data. I think the standards are kind of good and done,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Like they know how to operate the same way we do because they're just trained on our data. So I think like the ability to recreate standards actually is like very limited because that means you have to create training data to train these things against those standards. There's an RL world where like you could RL it, But I think generally speaking, these things are going to look more and more like humans because the world's built for humans. The same way you could argue like the LiDAR is a better system. I would represent MCP to LiDAR
Mm.
as Tesla
Interesting. Yeah.
to
Interesting.
APIs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But eventually, you don't think there's going to be. I'm sure in the short run you're right that the pace that the AI agents get better is going to be faster than the pace that everybody goes on to MCP, right? But is there going to? There has to be in the long run. Every serious company that wants to survive in this world had to build a website, and it was slow at first, right? And people could still get the information faster by looking at a phone book in the initial days, but eventually, to be a serious player for any business in the world, you have to have a website, and now you have to have an API, and then eventually you're going to have some agent, very efficient agent interaction model.
But what's the incentive? If the agents are that good, what's your incentive as a business to have an MCP of your tool, or your company?
Yeah.
Like
Just
the incentives in the period where we can't do it. It's like LiDAR. LiDAR is doing better than Tesla in some ways, and Tesla's recently like taken over again in the FSD space. Like it's a crutch, which is like going to get people ahead, but in the long run, we're just going to operate the same way humans do. That's my take, but
interesting.
we'll see.
But
What do you guys think?
who's to say that a human operation in the context of digital information is the most efficient way to operate?
It's not about efficient. What's the incentive? There's no incentive from the company. Efficiency is a different story.
But what's the incentive of building an API documentation?
You already built it.
No, but before you built it, right? Like, what's the incentive was I want more people to use my platform, more people to access my data, more people to interact with my business, right? So
You don't need
is there any difference?
you don't need the API though. That's what I'm saying. Is like there's no API either. It's just logins. And here's a crazier one that I'll throw like a absolute maybe completely out there idea. Google is purposely trying to not represent the current capability of Gemini because they still want control of Chrome. Because
So it's limiting capabilities of Gemini because it wants to have control of Chrome. So Gemini is like
otherwise the DOJ will make them divest Chrome. And right now, Apple has the Mac OS, Microsoft has the Windows OS, Google has Chrome. Those are the three systems that control interfaces: the browser, an OS, and another OS, and that's the entire market. So if Google loses Chrome OS as the controllable environment, it can be a big take. All those systems do not need to have APIs that connect into anything. I think like at least that's where my head's at around. Everyone's just going to be playing this control the UI the same way the user does because the whole world's already built this way.
Interesting.
That's an interesting take. I tend to agree more with what you're saying, Brendan. I think maybe on the incentive side is a little questionable. Like maybe some businesses may have an incentive to be easily indexable for agents and whatever. But I think the process of adopting MCP at scale is probably less beneficial in the long run than to simply make the agents better and just let them run loose on your screen or your browser.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Interesting. So no changes in the roadmap for Athena, it sounds like.
Same old.
Okay.
Now we'll probably put out a big MCP article next week. Who knows? Like we'll get on Twitter for it, but I think long term it won't be like a landmark experience. It's like DeepSeek to me. DeepSeek's loud, but tell me who's using DeepSeek as their actual model? Nobody.
Do you think there's a contrarian take that you guys have, or is this like more standard in the space of current
people who know what they're doing, not me? Are they all thinking the same thing, or like, what do you think?
There's a few people that I know. I won't name names that are more that have a similar take, but they're also yeah. I would say there's a few people.
But the majority is all into MCP.
I don't know. I don't know what people believe just because they post about it. these days. Like I don't think that's a good indicator if they actually believe it. But I know a few people in from quiet conversations that are not fully backing MCP as like a they don't see it all the way yet. But maybe we're wrong. Maybe maybe it is the big thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Few.
Do you guys have an MCP use case that you found is like crushing it?
To me, it just I'm non-technical, so I'm like, yeah, that just must be so much more efficient and easier. So my front end guys were talking about, using it with Figma. I was like, that sounds cool.
But do they?
They've started testing it. There's some like open source
Yeah.
version of it, but that's my extent of knowledge about the actual implementation. I'm just reading what everybody's reading on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels loud right now, but well, I'm excited. I'm excited to see it take shape. Do you guys feel like you would if you were in someone's position like myself, try to build one of these, or would you let the market kind of find its way into the right answer?
I think there's so many distractions, man. And when I first heard of MCP, it just seemed like one of them. It's like, oh, this is
Yeah,
a new hot new thing.
yeah,
And I think a lot of you need to have a lot of skill to
tell them
discern
apart.
and tell
Yeah,
apart what is actually worth taking a look at and paying attention to,
yeah,
and what is just a
yeah,
distraction.
yeah.
I think a really good contrast, for example, is inference time compute. So thinking for longer and then generating better answers. Having the ability to tell, is this a fad or is this actually something that the entire field is moving towards and something that's worth betting on? I think it's more of the latter versus MCP, where is this a fad or is this something really where the whole field is moving towards? And I think it's more of the former. So I think that's really the skill of a founder or just like a product person in general. It's like what is something that we need to focus on and pay attention to when everybody's talking about it, and what is just like ignore and move on.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that. I think especially in a world that's moving so fast in this technology, your roadmap is like sacred, right? You can't get distracted.
Talking about this distractions versus real shifts happening again, I want to take us to robotics here. And before I start talking about some ideas that I have here, I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. I think um, usually when you're deep into a specific field, it
Mhm.
seems much louder and bigger than it actually is, but it takes some time for you to take 3 steps away and realize, oh, this is actually not as big as I thought it was going to be. Um, or it's not as big as it seems because of my sphere of information. So first
Mhm.
off, I wanna get your guys' thoughts. Like, what is your current understanding of the robotics landscape? Where are we? Where are we going towards? What excites you in that space, if anything?
Mhm. I'm just curious to understand like why there's such like a big kind of jump in capabilities. They've been working on this stuff forever, right? Like humanoid robots are not new. What really has changed that is going to make this so much faster, so much more adopted than it has been before? That's kind of my
Okay.
question. Yeah.
Uh, I have some thoughts there, but Brendan, any other thoughts or ideas you have there?
Yeah, I'm interested in like how funding for this has changed. Like historically, the hardware bets are far and in between, and they would have to be like extremely consolidated, concentrated in order for there to be enough of a
Hmm.
investor appetite for the timelines. Um, so I'm actually I have some ideas on like why it's like successful, but I'm more interested in maybe like how are we seeing a resurgence in hardware from investors at the like small stage, or is it just like they're throwing more money at Figure in Tesla and like a couple big players, and that's the loud thing that's actually happening.
Hmm.
Hamid, any thoughts there? I think my impression is that it's the latter. I think big well established companies are
Yeah,
raising humongous rounds. I think I don't know if it was Figure or if it was Uptronic that just
Yeah,
announced
Abtronic did, yeah.
another round. They were local to Austin, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, nice,
Uptronic raised 350 million Series A.
crazy.
uh,
Series A,
Series A, 350
what
million
the
Series A. But
I
at
the
the
way
same
I'll
time,
tell you why that happens just from like an investor perspective. Like I've seen this party way too many times where there's like a really interesting technology and the software is, take it. The investors that invest in the software are actually the ones who understand the technology, and it's the more traditional kind of investors who don't understand the technology that feel just more comfortable with the physicality of a mining company in Bitcoin in crypto and the robotics company in AI. I've seen that like time and again. So all of the Dallas guys, like the real estate guys in Dallas and the oil and gas guys, they always, just gravitate towards the physical because they can go to a factory and they can see the things being built, right? And they would rather put money in that than software because it feels too, soft to them.
Yeah, but
I have
I mean, at the same time,
a quick story on that before I forget. So this exact example at Palantir, when you sell to the U.S. government, they've historically built a procurement method for buying systems, physical systems. So when software came into the play, people struggled to sell software because it wasn't a physical system. So what Palantir did is, and a lot of players did this, they literally bought ruggedized laptops and they sold the laptop with the software installed. That was how you like bought this Palantir software, was buying a laptop with it installed, because then you could actually sell the actual laptop. Like that was real. That's
It's
real.
real. That's real for sure.
You really sold software by just installing it for someone and sending them a laptop.
Yeah.
it's actually interesting to look at the. I can pull up the announcement here, but it's really interesting to look at the the founder who was leading. It doesn't say who led the round. I think it doesn't mention it.
Is that
But
the
it talks
biggest round for
about the.
Texas? It has to be.
Maybe it probably is. Yeah.
That's crazy.
B Capital and Capital Factory with participation from Google.
Shut up.
So to your point, Ham, is like, okay, these guys, people who understand technology usually invest, and then a lot of the people who don't understand technology feel more comfortable with the physical aspect of it. But somebody who understands the technology still had to actually underwrite that Optronic was worth, I don't know, many billions of dollars, and that the valuation was justified. So I mean, is the valuation justified for Optronic? Maybe it's a little overhyped. That's an argument that could be made there. But to your point, like, why? I mean, if Optronic was trying to raise 5 years ago with the exact same technology, they wouldn't have raised $250 million, right? That wouldn't have happened. So why are investors who understand the technology and arguably understood the technology the same way previously are now willing to underwrite a round of $350 million?
Institutional investors, or by the way, any investors, they're not as sophisticated as people think. They're just not. That's the honest truth. Like the whole dumb money, like it's the dumbest money. Some of the dumbest money I've ever seen is the opposite of what you think dumb money is. They move in herds, dude. It's like the craziest thing. And they pile on to ideas when they see their peers piling on to ideas, and they pile out of ideas when they see their peers leaving. So I am not surprised at all that 5 years ago the same pitch didn't work, and 5 years ahead it works now, because your board is telling you, hey, what's the AI strategy? And the first thing that you can walk into and see, you're putting money into it. Like that's basically what's happening.
To your point on capabilities, I think what's been happening here is that since Transformers came out, and since not necessarily Transformers came out, but specifically since the large language model and the large vision model, or the vision language model started to pop up, people in robotics immediately started to use some of these vision language models and try to mount them into a robotic system and let the vision language model do the reasoning. And it turns out that actually it kind of works. It kind of works for something. So you can get navigation, and you can get pretty successful navigation if you do some sort of bespoke connection to the outputs of an out-of-the-box VLM to the navigation system of your robot. You can get maybe some basic object handling and so on. So a lot of these things actually worked with out-of-the-box reasoning with VLMs. Now what's happening is that for this new wave of humanoid robotics, you don't just like navigate environments, right? You need actual fine interaction with environment around you. And some specific models, what people call VLAs, vision language action models, are starting to pop up. Most of them train on internet data with some bespoke teleoperation data. Teleoperation is basically when somebody is wearing some specific device and they're handling objects, and then the robot is actually doing the action in a different place or in the same
mm,
location.
mm,
So models like this are starting to pop up, and then this is kind of on the. A lot of people are looking at this, and to your point of investors piling up and the narrative getting shaped, but a lot of people are starting to shape this narrative that we are right before the explosion
mm,
in humanoid robotics technology.
mm,
And I mean, I am preaching to the choir here. I'm sure that everybody
mm,
understands the impacts of having a humanoid robot in every home, or having a humanoid robot in every factory, or hundreds of humanoid robots in every
mm,
factory. This fundamentally changes society at a very deep level.
mhm,
Um, or at least that's pretty much the agreed consensus. But most
mhm,
people believe that we are in the at the moment before we go vertical,
mm,
basically, in terms of capabilities, in terms of deployment, in terms of total market cap, and so on and so forth. But what's happening right now in terms of the technology itself is the 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 hardware has not been the challenge. To your point, James, the hardware has been around for a long time. What's been the challenge is the reasoning and the ability to perform tasks that require just very holistic understanding of the
mm,
physical
mm,
world. And we're starting to get hints of this with some of the models that are coming up,
mm,
with some of the newer models that are starting to come up. So Figure announces like, oh, we had a breakthrough in AI. They announced their specific model. Like I can look up the name here. There's some open
mm.
source models as well for robotics. So it's some interesting things that are starting to happen, but nothing yet that you're like, oh my gosh, this actually changes the game.
Why do you think, given the hardware aspect of this, don't you think that the larger companies, like the publicly traded, like why isn't Tesla going to win all of this? Because this is also a manufacturing play, right? This is not just a software play.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
for
it's 100%
manufacturing, you need the scale to manufacture these things.
Yeah, so I think actually you mentioned Tesla, and I think Tesla is one very specific good example. Because Tesla, let's say compared to some massive company like I don't know, some other massive, I don't know, hardware company, even
Mhm.
like I don't know, Nvidia. Maybe that's
Nvidia, yeah, Nvidia.
a lot of these guys are a lot of these guys. Okay, so the challenge here is less about the hardware specifically and
Yeah,
manufacturing at scale. I mean, manufacturing at scale is not trivial. Sorry,
yeah.
what I'm showing right now is the Helix, the VLA that Figure announced. It's basically they're trying to create new scaling laws. Or mentioned that they have achieved new scaling laws. Google also actually announced a VLA not too long ago. Most of these VLAs are based in this system of System One, System Two. This is from the Thinking Fast and Slow book. System one is like the reactive control. System two is deep thinking, systematic thinking, and reasoning. So Figure has its own VLA. There's
Mm,
an open source VLA created by Hugging Face. There's
mm,
another VLA by Google and so on. But anyhow, back to your point, James, here, the question of why are the big companies are gonna not just gonna win this? They may. But I think this is less of a manufacturing problem,
mm.
um, less of a. I mean, manufacturing at scale is hard, right? It's not a trivial
What
thing.
is the
But there's
hardest? Don't you think it's the hardest? Like you can't open source manufacturing. You can open source these models, you can copy that, but you can't copy the factory.
I agree with that.
But it's less about the factory, man. It's less about the factory and more about the lessons that you get from the factory. Like,
Either way, you can't copy paste those lessons, but you can copy paste the software.
no, you can't. You can't copy paste those lessons because those lessons are actually the data that you're using to train your fleet, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's what specifically Tesla, Tesla does really well. And they've done the exact same process with FSZ. They deploy the fleet. They're collecting massive amounts of data, and they build this
And
magical
again, in that case as
flywheel effect.
well, scale is what makes them win.
Scale is what makes him win, but it's less scale for the sake of scaling manufacturing or just like making
Hmm.
1,000
Hmm.
of these devices, and more about how can you leverage scale to have
Yeah,
scale be the main driver of
distribution.
improvement.
Yeah,
Yeah, if
distribution.
you distribute at scale, and you're able to actually generate data, evaluations, testing sets from this scale, from this distribution, then that's where you actually build this flywheel effect. And this is something that Tesla has done extremely well for FSC, and they're also doing as well for Optimus. But it's really interesting as well that for Optimus specifically, I mean, you don't see Optimus bots walking around, right? Because we're not at that point yet. There's a massive implications to actually having humanoid robots walking around us and actual physical environments. So what these guys are doing is they've built I don't know if you guys do this. Is like a little. They haven't announced this, but you can just see from some of the announcements that they've made. They literally build human data farms where they have teams of teleoperators 24/7 teleoperating different bots, performing different tasks to generate all of this data. You could deploy this fleet to some industrial environment, sure, but is a fleet ready to operate in an industrial environment? Questionable. I think most humanoid robots, regardless of the company, can be Tesla, can be Optronic, can be Figure, can be 1X, whatever. They're not there yet to the point that they can be deployed and autonomously start to generate this feedback loop of data.
Sure.
So they need
let's
to create.
let's continue let's continue this discussion. This is a deeper topic, right? I think I agree with you. I think data and distribution are by far the
Yeah,
most important things, and so that's why I actually am a big believer that startups are going to have a hard time in many of these use cases. So we'll talk about that another time. I think good point to stop the episode. But yeah, thanks guys for the discussion.
good. Yes, thanks for the time check here. Any
Of
final thoughts?
course.
Any final remarks?
No, I think we're
I got,
good.
I got, I got one offline that I want to mention real quick to you guys.